let's start with Triin and Annika. So this is a really interesting topic, like how should we get to climate neutral in Estonia? And Lauri was optimistic, and I'm very pessimistic and optimistic at the same time, because I think that in a way we are with so much, there is so much more focus on this topic that this gives me hope, but we have been doing so many things wrong for such a long time that some things are already in really bad state. So let's start maybe, Annika, with you. Like, what's your first view on this? So how do you see everything, how this topic is handled and where we are?
Hello to everybody. Well, firstly, I think I'm like you. Like I'm optimistic. I want to be optimistic, but I also try to have like 2 feet on the ground and have a realistic understanding of what's going on. So the optimistic statistics, by the way, that I just read a few days ago is that according to Eurobarometer, 85% of Estonians actually support climate neutral plan, that we should get there, which is really nice thing to support something. But now when I think on are they all willing to also change their behavior, then I truly doubt. So I guess all these strategies, how to get there, are really nice. I mean, they all look nice on screens and on paper. And usually also the numbers add up and we are able to prove it. But now the question is the implementation part. And if you just said that, you know, for so long time we have done so many things wrong, then how come from now on we are not going to do that anymore? So that's why I'm remaining skeptical.
Okay, very good. And Triin?
I'm the positive side. I am very optimistic in it. I think when people start to realize of the problem, from there, basically the reactions start to happen and then the actions start to happen. And we see a lot of reactions, both in media, in the way people talk about it, and it shows that the topic is important and it raises interest. And from there, basically the change can start happen.
Okay, and I think that when I thought about today and the topics we cover, 2 stories kind of pop into my head. And again, one is positive, one is negative. One friend of mine is working also kind of trying to get schools more environmental friendly and how to kind of maybe how we should approach food. And she was super like sad after some meetings with school directors, like there like seemed no change of hope. And on the other hand, it's a kind of personal story, but I was taking a road trip with my kids during the summer. And we were discussing one day, we didn't do it every day, but what's happening to the world, what's next? And I was walking somewhere in Italy, and I kind of hear the 2 older kids, one of them is 15, other one 14, kind of discussing among themselves this kind of what technology will change. And then the older one says that, does it all even matter if the life in our latitude is not possible anymore? So that for me was very positive, because what I see, the younger generation is growing up and they are thinking totally differently about that. And so the next question, Triin, to you was like, in a startup life, you see that also like lots of millennials there.
Yes.
And what was a good thing that lately the Tech Green Pledge that was started just a couple of weeks ago?
Yes, we started the Tech Green Pledge. I think the initiative, basically we started to talk about it 3 weeks ago, and it was kicked off 2 weeks ago, like officially kicked off. And I think our pledge shows very well that people are ready for a change, because it took us only 2 days to get 50 companies from Estonia to sign up. It's a big number of companies who are willing to do it. So yes, and I don't think it's only like age questions, because yes, we like to think that startups only a young thing, but think of the Skype. Skype is my age people, which kickstarted basically the movement in Estonia, and we are 40 plus already. So yes, again, I strongly believe that the time is right. The impacts are visible enough to make it serious. And now it's just start to take actions from small step into bigger steps.
And maybe I will ask that a bit differently now as well, that one day I walked on the street and thought that in a way, if we are talking about the environment, average person who walks like towards me is also a consumer and a voter. So that means their kind of change in their minds can affect this all in two ways, right? So if you're talking about will the kind of move towards climate neutral position in Estonia happen, it needs government changes, private businesses need to do that, and consumers need to do that. But it quite often starts with the people who walk on the streets. If they start kind of demanding that from the representatives in the government, and if they start buying things that kind of are done in a environmentally friendly way, then we could have a huge change. So first, let's start from the government view. Lauri, like, do you see that on the government level there is also kind of willingness to be more active with it?
Yes, definitely. And I would say, even I would be as optimistic in a sense, I would say we haven't done things terribly wrong in a sense. If you look at the growth of renewables in Estonia, it has been one of the fastest in Europe in the last 10 years. If you look at the emission reductions, okay, it's the drop compared to 1990, and the huge drop happened in the early 90s with the collapse of heavy industry. But again, if you take the renewables, energy efficiency and so on, things have happened in Estonia, and things have happened because as in other domains, Estonia is flexible and fast. But the point being is they still need to happen even faster. And there has been a plateau. If you think in the last 5 years, then the investments into larger scale renewables has been hindered in Estonia. Rather, you would have seen a small solar being added rapidly. So I would make that remark. But if we are talking about, indeed, there are two sides. One is the consumer side. What can I do as a private citizen and a consumer and a voter? And these are, effects of do I renovate my house or my apartment house? To what kind of car do I buy? What mode of transport do I use, and so on. But some of the bigger changes, like you don't individually buy a nuclear reactor or build an offshore wind park, at least not yet. So some things have to need a certain framework to happen, and there at least as well. Yes, we had a growth spurt in renewables at some point. Now it has been hindered, but I think now with today's decision, the government has put on itself also pressure, because now people will start asking, okay, you made this decision, so what's your plan? What's your game plan? What will you do as a next step? When will we see these big investments happening? And at least what I know from the discussions in the cabinet and also the Climate and Energy Commission, that is on the agenda of the government, definitely, and also because there are several instruments available to the public sector as well. The ETS revenues, that's emission trading system revenues, they have been used currently for supporting these investments into these, but they could be used more. Currently, we are using roughly 50% because that's the required minimum share. If we are talking about that we need to speed up, then the question is, do we increase that share from 50% to, and to what degree? There's also European funds available for the, these fossil regions. That was one of the promises made from the Commission, that yes, if we make this transition, we will create a special instrument. Now it's, will Estonia propose investments to be, financed from this instrument, saying because we are clearly one of the most carbon intensive with a specific unique problem on the border with the power grids to Russia and carbon leakage and so on. There are clear arguments and cases to be made to utilize as much as possible these funding instruments. Plus, in addition, to ask from the private sector, okay, we are talking about huge investments here. what needs to be done from our side in order the private sector could make these investments. And this is clearly one of the key next things to happen. The government has to talk to the stakeholders and say, okay, we see that there's potential. How do we tap into it? Energy efficiency as well. For years and years and years, we have been talking about energy efficiency, but still we only see limited action regarding apartment houses, and then okay, we see private consulting companies focusing on perhaps retailers and so on. But it's still way below the pace and level that is required.
Okay, and Annika, from like you at your work, you also kind of work a lot with private companies, probably not just in Estonia, right? So how do you see that, the kind of mindset change there?
Well, firstly, I'd like to correct, Lauri, what you said before when you answered to the questions after your presentation. Then you said that, in the old days, there was this, that they gave this job to corporate social responsibility officer, and they did some greenwashing there. Then actually, the fact is there isn't such a job in Estonia, like a CSR officer or CSR expert in Estonian companies. I've researched...
I've even met some who have given business cards in Swedbank, for example.
Swedbank is a Swedish bank, by the way, it's not Estonian.
Okay.
So, let's agree, there are like, both of them are, but no more. And the thing is that I've researched it a lot in past years, the kind of the understanding of companies' responsibility in tackling societal issues and all that. On both sides, rather the expectations from the citizens and also the understanding among opinion leaders and CEOs. And I would say that the will is there, but it's really not clear yet what's the plan and what to do. And still many of the leaders kind of tend to think that, it's still a bit of nice words and all of that. It's time to put the climate headline out there and let's talk about it. But now when you go into those companies and really look deep in there, they're not changing their everyday behavior. How many offices we have in Estonia who even actually manage to displace garbage on different garbage bins? It starts from little things, and maybe it sounds a bit naive if I bring this kind of example, but as you said also before, that big changes start from small behavioral changes. So I think we have a lot to grow here, and it starts from setting an example. And I think this pledge that the tech companies did is like a really good one. Again, as well as to the government and to the tech companies, I'm kind of waiting to see, so what's going to happen? What are you going to really do? And I hope very fast answer to that. But, and another point I wanted to make is, regarding where we are as a society in Estonia. And I'm sorry I don't have this data on Latvia and Lithuania, but 2 years ago we conducted a survey in Finland, Sweden and Estonia to understand what are their expectations towards companies to act. And so we also asked like topics what matters the most. And in Finland and Sweden, climate change was #1. And that was totally not a surprise to me at all. But then in Estonia, it was on 7th place. Of course, and like human rights or labor issues are much more important. But and protecting our nature that is close to us is very important to Estonians. But these kind of bigger issues, global issues, or the understanding that we are not, the village in silos, but we are actually part of the bigger system, that I think we still lack a bit of that. And education is the key word here, I think.
It's not only a function of education, it's about also the reach and the scale of global businesses. I think if you look at the Finnish companies, or Fortum, good example, they work globally, they invest globally. They see in their markets, they see the impact, they see the climate impacts, they see the vulnerabilities. The same goes for the large Swedish corporations. they work in China, they work in developing countries, they see immediately, they get the direction. Estonian companies, on average, mostly are smaller and work regionally also more in Nordic, Baltic markets and so on. So only those companies, I think, who are working directly with different, whether it's supply chains or customers across the globe, I think they realize that actually, yes, indeed, these are the real things which are very visible and also that they affect their businesses much more. So it's not about awareness raising only, it's about really the scale and scope of the business as well.
True, because you're going to feel it immediately. When you go to Sweden and you want to find investors, then, and if you don't have a proper sustainability agenda, then, I mean, that's just not enough, and you're not going to get the money. And I think that's especially important when we talk about infrastructure investments, because you need to look, these are usually long-term investments, and you need to understand where the world is going probably in the next 20 or 40 years. It's not enough that, you know, today we still have many diesel cars, but I wouldn't invest into the company who's producing diesel cars anymore, right? So it doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, and I think that this is what Annika raised also is very interesting, because I think that the Tech Green Pledge that I think started at Veriff and then involved many other tech companies here, I know the people there, I know this is sincere, right? So,
Yes,
this comes from the heart. Whereas I worked also with many multinationals globally, and some of those like green slogans are very empty. And I just, a friend showed me lately a kind of YouTube video that was mocking or ridiculing even a product by Unilever, I think, which was called something like Planet, Beauty and Me, or like some kind of shampoo. And like, sounds very nice, but like that isn't like fully there that this is like sustainable product. So Triin, like, and Annika also from the private sector side, Triin, maybe you first, do you see that this is also an issue? Like this being like sometimes empty words only?
Of course. It's, if there is, I think it's such a hot topic that it's just normal, that it creates not always like it's sincere action, but sometimes also just something to do with the PR. I can, yes, say sincerely that in our case, it was exactly that we all wanted to do the change in the companies. And then we came together and we realized that we are in the similar place, that, like Annika said, that the will is there, but how to get there. And to come up with a really good plan, it's always easier to like basically do it together and to learn from each other's actions and to come up with a sustainable and a trackable, basically an action plan how to do it. So for our case, we, coming from a tech sector which is really data-driven, we understand that the first thing is exactly to map out what is the impact to the climate inside of each company. Because otherwise you do not understand where the peak, basically, things are, where you can start the change. Is it the house where your company is located? Is it the way you do your business? Is it the, we are all in technology, so this means that we have huge server parks somewhere. Is it the energy which is used by those server parks? Where is actually our climate footprint is the most heaviest is. And then from there, if we come up with that, then we can start doing the actual tracking of it and then see like step by step how things are starting to change. And through basically give visibility of our efforts and our struggles by doing it, then we can hopefully inspire other companies and other people to do the same things. So it starts from there. And yes, so the first answer is yes, of course there is some emptiness, but I know also that there is a lot of actual will and actual desire to become carbon neutral and to create a positive change through that.
And with the consumer getting smarter by the day and kind of maybe the Unilever campaign in the end could have backfired because people were making fun out of it because they don't believe that easily anymore. So I think that could change the game as well, right?
Yes, of course. And that's why it's like exactly, you don't just say it. We have to show it that we are doing it. And we have to show why we are doing it, how we are doing it, and what is the impact behind it. If there is this full logical steps and like trackability around it, then it's just not empty words. And from from basically giving the visibility for it, then comes the accountability toward too. It's just like, oh, 50 companies did a pledge, but it's like 50 companies now do those steps, and you can see what we are doing. And from there, exactly the accountability comes through. And then it becomes something people can take seriously, both the consumers also. Because in the end, yes, we do business. We want to show what we do, both not only to the investment side, but also to the consumers who use our products.
Yeah, very good. So this is super interesting, and I think that audience might have some questions as well. So let's have the questions on the wall here and see what interesting things are asked. So Trine, how do you avoid the greenwash risk? At some point you might have 1,000 companies join the green pledge, do nothing.
Do you scrutinize somehow who's joining the pledge and if they do follow-up?
We do light screening, to be honest, because if we see from the start that this is something which is done exactly to do only for the PR or to do it for some political reasons or something like that, then we ask a serious question: is there a real impact behind it? So it's not just like because exactly we want to show the visibility. We want to show the actual change. And that means that if you sign up, the company signs up, then they have to have this commitment that first they do the mapping of their impact, and then we can start tracking how they are working on it.
Verify it.
So Annika, there is a question also to you. What should change in terms of politics in Estonia so that green infrastructure projects wouldn't always stuck because of politics?
Good question. Well, firstly, people should start voting then maybe differently. That's kind of one thing, if it hasn't resulted as we wish yet. But I think the problem with politics today is that I don't see enough brave decisions. It's like, the very Estonian example is everything going on with the discussion around oil shale. I mean, it's not a surprise that this is what actually creates those high numbers of emitted carbon for Estonia. And yet there still hasn't been a decision that would actually say directly, we're moving beyond that. Actually, there are business plans built right now that maybe we should actually develop it. So this is kind of my question today, that everything that Lauri presented before, there are like a lot of brave decisions part of it. And there might be even a question that we need to discuss in Estonia, would we have nuclear energy as well? If you say nuclear in Estonia, people are going to run away because it's scary, right? But nobody talks about the technology nowadays that is totally different what we think that is. So what would change is that we vote for those people who are actually not afraid to make decisions that might be painful today, but these are made for the future. I hope it answered. It's difficult.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm missing those brave decisions from the government sector as well, because I think that change is pretty hard always to make in the government sector, but this is something that really requires a change. So I know maybe, Lauri, it's hard for you to say, like, but do you agree with that, or?
Still, I will point out that government made one very brave decision today. I mean, it's a huge decision and commitment, because now, as with the Green Pledge, people are asking, what will you do? And if there's no answer for 2 years on, what our next steps is, what shall we do in terms of regulatory, or how do we solve the NIMBY problem, or, what's our plan for financing this, then obviously I think they will be voted down then, if there's nothing happening on this front. So I would say it's absolutely not enough by making this decision, but it's one of the decisions that has not been made before. So I'm happy that this decision was made, and I'm really hoping now that actually all private sector actors, but also private citizens, everyone who sees that the changes that need to happen will ask, okay, but what about the next big decisions now? In what order shall we start moving?
I'd just like to comment. I'm also truly happy about the decision, but I'm also remaining fairly skeptical. Being part of Estonian politics for over a decade, I kind of have a different view on it, because the decision is nice, and this is something I don't think our government could have avoided, since this is the plan of the EU, but it took time for them, and thanks to your research, they actually did this decision as well. But we still have people, part of government, who say out publicly that human factor has nothing to do with the fact of that climate is changing. So until we have this kind of misinformation spread it out in the country on that high level, I think there is always a threat that one day you can make another decision. Because there is also a decision made, it was less than half a year ago, when it was promised that 1% of GDP will go into R&D. And at the end, at the strategy, the budget strategy, it wasn't in there. So I know that it gives a clear direction right now, but now the implementation.
But I think also the overall global forces are really so strong that you just cannot ignore. If we take the Donald Trump rhetoric, and even if we take that actually he has removed certain barriers around coal energy, still the phasing out of coal is still happening, because the market forces are just so strong. In US, there's a rapid investment into wind, solar, and gas. Why? Because they make much more economic sense. So you can do rhetorically whatever you want. You can even ease the regulatory burdens, but the overall forces are just pushing into certain direction. And I think disregarding of the overall, with the rhetorics and support, you can faster the pace or slower a little bit, but not change the direction of the movement. So that's, I think, the choices that you can make: accelerate or brake a little bit, but not stop or reverse.
And I think these forces actually become stronger when the youngest generation will grow. Because today we are the ones, or older people are the ones who are still making the decisions. But the same research I referred before said that people at the age of 18 to 23, also in Estonia, think the climate change is the most important thing, as Swedes or Finns do today. That just shows that maybe we are just few steps behind in this value chain, but it is coming. And therefore, okay, I'm with you.
This is a good panel. I like it because the most boring panel usually they say is the one where everybody agrees to everything. So, but we have to wrap it up. We have 2 minutes left. So I will ask from everybody as a kind of to sum it up. What would be your wish that would change in Estonia, that we would be moving towards that direction? Like one thing that I want this would be amazing, this needs to change. So, who wants to start?
Nobody.
You go.
I go. I'm saying it as a person, another member of a tech green pledge, because I have to be neutral politically there. But there is exactly one thing inside of me. I have 4 kids, so I have a lot of anxiety about our future anyway. Is exactly the knowledge of people, because and I agree with Annika that the younger generation has much more understanding about it anyway, but I hope there would be like a wider understanding what actually means a climate change. Because when I told my 16-year-old son that I'm doing things like Tech Green Pledge, then he didn't ask like what it was or anything. He was just like, what you do about methane? I was like, okay, I will figure it out. So yes, the wider understanding of the issue is what I would like to see in this country happening.
I will borrow a quote actually from another 16-year-old, a girl, and that is unite behind the science and listen to the scientists. That she Greta, I mean, has said several times, and I think this is what we should do as well in Estonia. So I believe that's where it starts, the change.
Lauri?
I would really like to see, the mental change that we take that this is a great opportunity. Not that it's a huge burden or awful challenge, but see it as a huge opportunity for us to continue to innovate. If we look at the last 29 years up to now and think that 2050 we are talking about 30 years, how much has Estonia changed during the last 30 years, and now why we think that we should lose somehow the ability to innovate and change as a society rapidly. So take it as an opportunity and really continue to surprise ourselves and others by the pace and innovation.
Excellent. So let's give a big round of applause to this fine panel. And thank you all.